All right, I think we're going to get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar for PRIMRE. PRIMRE is the portal and repository for information on marine renewable energy. And this is one in a series of webinars we've held. Today's webinar is going to be introducing you to some of the new features on PRIMRE, what we call our knowledge hubs. My name is Andrea Copping. I'm with Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. And today you'll be hearing from several speakers also from Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, Jonathan Whiting, Lisel Garavelli, and Haley Farr. Next slide, please. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to do a little bit of sort of refresher background on PRIMRE. We're going to do an update on one of the knowledge hubs known as Teethis Engineering. We did feature this in a webinar maybe a year ago, but it was just being stood up, so there's quite a bit more there now. We're really going to focus on the aggregate search across the PRIMRE platform so that you can go from one knowledge hub to another with a single search. We're going to talk about our signature projects, feature the photo library we have for marine energy on Tethys Engineering, and close with a very short discussion of our new project lessons learned. And we'll make sure there's lots of time for questions and answers at the end. Next slide, please. So this kind of inexplicable diagram is what we've been using for some time. We are having it redrawn. But the real idea here is if you look to the center, PRIMRE is our landing page. It is our organizing hub for this sort of hub and spoke idea. And the knowledge hubs are those boxes in blue: MHK Data Repository, Teethis Engineering, MRE Software, MRE Technology Database, Telesto, which is instrumentation, and so on. And there will also in future be links to other domestic and international databases. So that's sort of the overall lay of the land. Next slide, please. So what is PRIMRE? PRIMRE is our method of organizing the data that have been generated largely based on information from projects funded by the Department of Energy Water Power Technology Office, although these knowledge hubs have way more information beyond that. But the point is really to organize this information, and it ranges from engineering and technology, papers and reports, resource characterization, databases, results and guidance on device performance and testing, all the way through environmental effects of marine energy. If we look at the main PRIMRE page, which is what is pictured here, we see that there's a fair amount on it, but the main buttons, if you look to sort of the center of the main bar, can take you to MRE basics. So the idea being that someone just arriving on the page wants to know what marine renewable energy is. There's some information there and some terminology. Then there is the opportunity to get to the signature projects and the various knowledge hubs. We also feature an events calendar, organizations and information about them, those supporting marine renewables such as Ocean Energy Systems, the International Electrochemical Commission. We also archive and provide space for STEM resources and competitions and activities that Department of Energy is funding in this space. We have guidelines for communicating better with PRIMRE if you want to have your database communicate. And then our signature projects we'll talk about later, etc. Next slide, please. All right, the knowledge hubs, there are 3 that are just been stood up this year in 2020, and we're not going to really dig down into most of those today, but just to give you a snapshot of them. The Marine Renewable Energy Technology Base is a large database that contains information on devices. It's got, it points to the companies, the developers, and also the researchers who are responsible for contributing to this industry. The MRE software is really made up of a code hub and a code catalog, and this is where we gather together software that is relevant to marine renewable energy development. And we, for the most part, if not entirely, this is open source software with the point of trying to have people provide some standardization for the models, the codes, et cetera, that are available. We're not advocating any particular models or codes, but this is what's available and we believe is past muster for being useful to the industry. Telesto is our newest hub stood up. It's a collection of information that really seeks to provide guidance for how one might test, measure, and analyze results of marine renewable energy research, development, and also deployments and demonstration. Next slide, please. Could I get the next slide, please?
It is the next slide.
Oh, is it? Because mine didn't turn. Okay. Oh, dear. Hold on one second. I don't know what the next slide says is the problem. Apologies, everybody. Technology, you know.
MHKDR.
Okay, great. And then we have 3 knowledge hubs that have been operational on PRIMRE for some time. The Marine and Hydrokinetic Data Repository, known as MHKDR. This is the spot where actual data sets are collected from water power projects funded by Department of Energy for research and development. It's testing data, resource characterization, et cetera. And if any of you on the phone have had support from the Department of Energy for marine renewables, you will know that your data are required to go into this repository. So there's been a lot of work done on MHKDR in the last couple of years to make it more accessible, more searchable, and so on. So it'd be, if you haven't visited in a while, it'd be a good idea. Tethys is deals with environmental effects of marine renewables. It also includes wind, by the way. And this gathers together a curated selection of documents. There's over 6,600 right now. We also use it to support our Ocean Energy Systems Environmental Initiative with webinars and expert forums and all kinds of things that are supported there, including the recently released State of the Science report. Teethis Engineering is the newest of the old knowledge hubs. It was stood up in 2019, and it is really a sister site to Tethys, but instead of environmental information, it hosts documents on the engineering and technical aspects of marine renewables. And you can see that there's about 4,700 of them right now. That library is still being built up. And later on, Haley will show you the library of photos that are free for third-party use, and that is also hosted on Tethys Engineering. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to hand it over, but I realize at the top I was remiss in saying, although we have Pacific Northwest National Laboratory personnel talking here today, in fact, this is a project that is led by 3 laboratories, PNNL, Sandia National Laboratories, and the National Renewable Energy Lab. And we all work together to create the Tethys environment, and each lab sort of has their piece of it that they take care of. Okay, at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Jonathan Whiting, who is going to go through some of the elements of Teethis Engineering with you. John.
All right, great. So my focus will be more on the aggregate search once we get there, but we did want to give a quick refresher on the Teethis Engineering database, just because it's relatively new and a lot of the resources being showcased today are found on Teethis Engineering. So this database was launched 1 year ago. As Andrea noted, it was designed after Tethys, but it covers engineering and technical design of marine renewable energy rather than environmental effects. So Tethys primarily stores documents, and this is everything from peer-reviewed journal articles to reports and conference papers and other gray literature, the latter, which is often harder to find elsewhere. Tethys Engineering is international in scope, and as Andrea noted, it currently has over 4,700 documents, with new documents being added daily by our team. Many of the same tools and views on Tethys are also on Tethys Engineering. You have a knowledge base that allows you to search, filter, and sort in more of a table format as you look through the documents. The map viewer is a searchable map that has a subset of content that is geographically tagged, and you have kind of a nice clustering algorithm that lets you zoom in and makes it a couple thousand pieces of content look a little less wieldy. There is also an events calendar for upcoming international conferences and webinars, both of which have looked quite similar since COVID. The glossary, similar to what is on PRIMRE, it provides some descriptions of the terms that we use on the site, and we do use some different terms on the site in addition to the general marine renewable energy terms. And it does provide a list of documents below each term, so it is useful whether you are new to the industry and looking for some high-level information, or whether you're doing in-depth research. You can subscribe to the Teethis Engineering Blast. It's a bi-weekly newsletter where we send out new publications, new events internationally, new deadlines for abstract submissions at conferences and all sorts of stuff like that. Very, very useful information. And then with that, we're going to cover the next bit, the aggregate search and signature projects and photo library. We're going to go into more detail. So if we go to the next slide, we'll jump into the aggregate search. So this is this new feature for PRIMRE is very core to our mission. It provides better access to marine renewable energy data and information across the PRIMRE network. We believe that establishing access to data will help facilitate the advancement of the industry, and that really is our goal. Users should be able to view or to visit PRIMRE and find any information on testing, resource characterization, technical design, environmental effects, and more. PRIMRE search currently shows results for Teethis, Teethis Engineering, MHKDR, the technologies database, and Telesto. But likewise, you can do a search on Teethis and it will show results for MHKDR and vice versa. So we've enabled this cross-website search at the individual level as well. And we took a flexible approach so that future websites can also be integrated into the search. So with that, I'm actually going to switch over and do a little bit of a live demo of some of these components, if you bear with us for a quick second. All right. Hopefully you can see that screen. Someone stop me if you can't. So I'm going to start by showing the PRIMRE guidelines. Now, you might recognize this. This is the PRIMRE homepage. If you scroll down towards the bottom right here, we have a little bar that says PRIMRE guidelines. So this is a living document detailing the framework of PRIMRE. The document provides some background on PRIMRE, describes how new websites can integrate with PRIMRE. It defines some standardization of terminology and creates a metadata schema. So there's a lot of information here. For the sake of time, I want to highlight two things. First is in terms of the standardization of terminology. In most cases, PRIMRE is basically following IEC TC 114 guidelines for marine renewable energy terminology. So we're looking at international standards with all of this. There was some additional work with standardization of technology or of terms that we used for, what do we mean by specific dates that we mentioned, and what is a publisher versus an author and things like that. That we also looked at international standards to guide. But there's a lot of work in terms of kind of making that terminology consistent. And then maybe most important to what we're talking about today, we have this metadata schema that's meant to guide the integration of websites into PRIMRE. This details exactly which fields should be included into a JSON endpoint. And then we recognize that every database does things a little bit differently. You might have different content types or different scope or different taxonomy tags, ways that you kind of have divvied up the and tagged the content. So our team kind of went for the lowest common denominator in this approach in order to be flexible. We are building off of proven schemas such as DCAT and Project Open Data. And if a database wants to integrate with PRIMRE, they simply need to follow this roadmap here in Appendix B. It tells you, gives kind of a definition for each field, gives an example, tells whether it's required or not. And so a lot of helpful information. So we can work with developers if anyone is interested in integrating. And once the endpoint is established, we can run daily imports to get new content moved into PRIMRE and any other databases where we want to connect. So during the next year, our team plans to target some international databases for inclusion as well. So moving on, now I want to kind of demo the aggregate search. New on PRIMRE, we have this search here. So from the home page, you can search any term. I'm going to be very meta and use the word testing. By this, of course, I mean testing and tank testing or open water testing, something to do with marine renewables. So this is what the search page looks like on PRIMRE. And you can see, it uses Elasticsearch full text search engine, and it prioritizes results based on relevance. You can refine your search a little bit further with these facets on the left, with everything from selecting a specific technology you're interested in, or topics, or even the signature projects, which we'll get more into. So in this first example, you'll see that this first here, this goes to MHKDR. If you look down a little bit further, this third option, sorry, clicking around the screen sharing thing, sends you to Teethis. You can see the fourth option is actually going to send you to Teethis Engineering. So you're getting a nice mix of results from all the different websites, which is pretty cool. Now, one last thing I wanted to show is if you go to Teethis Engineering, I mentioned that there's also interconnectedness between the different sites, and you can try this out on any of the different sites. Now, if I search up here in the search bar, again, just searching for testing, tank testing, or open water testing, individual sites can also connect. So they can, each database can kind of choose how they want to make this connection, or they may choose not to connect at all. Both of the Teethis websites have opted to show the local results first. That way you can still find what you're looking for in Teethis Engineering. But if you want to, I can click over here to Teethis, and I'm going to get all the environmental results that send you over to Teethis. And here we do have most of the tags are more environmental in nature, things like noise and fish and birds. And then you can go over to MHKDR, and likewise, you're going to get a different set of tags here associated with this content. And so it allows you to kind of search through the different databases, but more on a database level. And just like, so you have all these facets that you can kind of filter down in. So that's it for the demo. If Haley wants to take back control, and I'll talk a little bit while she's doing that. It's basically, effectively integrating databases is not a simple task, but a framework has been created to improve overall access to marine renewable energy content. And our PRIMRE team works in the individual databases daily, but we recognize that someone from the community might not recognize the differences between these different databases. So this is a nice feature because someone without that background, someone new to the area, can quickly and easily find authoritative information from curated government-funded databases. So with that, I will now pass it off to Lizelle Garavelli to talk about signature projects.
Thank you, John. And before I start, just wanted to remind you that you can ask us questions, and please feel free to write your question on the chat box. So I'm going to talk about the signature project. And what are signature projects? There are selected projects and initially funded by the US Department of Energy Water Power Technology Office, DOE WPTO. The purpose of this signature project is to ensure that WPTO project information is easily discoverable by and sufficient for the MRE community to learn and engage. And this is a work that we started last year, and we wanted to select a few projects that could become signature projects. So for this, we had different criteria. The first one, the project would have some information available, but scattered, difficult to find. The project could be already finalized, or they could be new project of special interest across WPTO portfolio. They could be of international relevance, could have abundant lessons learned, and they could be under a multi-lab or multi-organization collaboration. And finally, this can be project that DOE wants to give more prominence or web presence. So you can have more information about the signature project on this link below on the slide under Teethis Engineering, but I'm going to dive a bit more into some of them. Next slide, please. So if you go under PRIMRE, so you have also this kind of information. What we wanted to do here, the objective was to gather the information on project purpose, method, and key finding or application under the PRIMRE portfolio. And we wanted to collect all the project reports, dataset, and HTTP paper for them to be more easily discoverable. So for each signature project, we made a landing page describing the project, the status, the owner, relevant material, and update and impact on the MRE industry. So on the right, you see the page that if you go under the signature project on PRIMRE, this is going to be this page, where at the beginning you have a small paragraph describing what are the signature projects, so pretty much a summary of what I just said. And at the bottom, this table where you have the 4 signature project we've been working on last year. And the objective for us is to add 3 more this year. So for now, the signature projects that we have are WEXIM. So WEXIM is an open source code developed in MATLAB Simulink for simulating wave energy converters. The second one that we have is a reference model project, which is a partner effort to develop open source marine hydrokinetic point design as a reference model to benchmark MHK technology performance and cost. Third one is IEC-TC 114. So it's an International Electrotechnical Commission, Technical Committee 114, which was established in 2007 to develop international consensus-based standard for the marine energy industry. So John talked about that already. And finally is the Advanced Wake Dynamics and Control, which focus on transitioning control design approaches from simplified paper study to application in full-scale devices. So under PRIMRE, you can click on each one of these projects, and for now, it's going to redirect you to Tethys Engineering. So next slide. We have the same page. So on Tethys Engineering under connection, we have the same signature project page, very similar, the summary of the signature project, this 4 signature project, and here you can find all the project report and associated paper. And we just wanted today to show you like for the pages for one project. So we are going to dive into reference model project. You can click on each of these projects, but if we click on the reference model project, this opens this page. And what we wanted to do for the signature project was to have the same page built, the page, of each signature project built similarly. So for each signature project page, you will have the title, project purpose, project description, project tags that I'm going to come back just in a few, project methods, and on the right, all the details about the signature project. So title, status, start date, end date. If there is more content available, we have a link, the organization which is leading the project, and the point of contact. So regarding the project tags, as you may know, under Teethis Engineering and also under Tethys, but particularly here because we are focusing on Teethis Engineering, every time we add a paper, we are tagging it. So with device, technology, etc., which make the people, like for the people, it's make it easy for them to find the paper. If when you look at the knowledge base, you can find all the tags. So here for each signature project, every time we are adding a document, we are also tagging it with the name of the signature project. And for reference model project, there are actually 6 reference models. So you can see here like the tidal current turbine, river current turbine, etc. So if we have a document that is about reference model project and also about one of these reference models, it's going to be tagged with 2. And I'm going to, with these 2, and I'm going to show you an example after. Next slide, please. So the bottom of the reference model project page, you will find the key finding and application. And this table, this is just like a screenshot of, it's a very big table because as you see, we have 46 documents for the reference model project. And you will have, in this table, you have all the project reports and related papers. And it's pretty much summarized all the paper that, so all the papers that we have, and it's title, author, date, type of content, technology, collection method, and device. So the technology, collection method, and device are the tags that already exist under Tethys Engineering. So you can click on every one of these papers. So for example, if we click on this one, levelized cost of energy for backward bent duct buoy, we have for each paper, this is the same, we have the abstract. If there is a location, which is the case here, you have a map showing the location, and on the right, you have all the details of the paper that you can find. And in the, you can see on the first box at the bottom, it's written signature project, reference model project, and RM6 oscillating water column. So this paper was tagged with these two tags. And you have external link if the document is available, and the citation, which is pretty useful. So next slide, please. This is just the last slide about signature project, where I told you you can click on each of these reference model tags. And for example, if you had clicked on the reference model 3, you will find this page open, and pretty much is like similarly, you have a summary of what are the reference model project, and after the description of what is reference model 3, and not showing here, but at the bottom, you will see a table with all the paper related to reference model 3. So please go to Teethis Engineering, check all the signature project. I told you we are looking to add more. If you have any suggestion, please let us know. And next slide. Now, Haley is going to talk about the photo library. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. And I'm actually going to hop back onto Teethis Engineering really quick. So one moment, please. Okay, so the Teethis Engineering Photo Library hosts over 400 high-resolution photos and illustrations of marine renewable devices, arrays, and facilities that are at various stages of development. These have all been graciously provided by over 40 developers worldwide, and they only request that you, these are available for third-party use, as long as attribution is given to the developer. You can use the search bar along the top to find images from a particular developer, or you can scroll down throughout the library and you'll notice that they're organized alphabetically. You can then use the dots along the bottom to then scroll through the individual photos for each developer. And while you can save directly from this screen, we recommend that you open it in a new tab, the image in a new tab or screen to save the truly high resolution version. And I'll just show some examples. We do have both photos and illustrations as well as GIFs in the library to use in future papers or presentations. And then as I jump back really quick, excuse me. So finally, if you are a developer and would like to contribute any photos to the library, my email is on the screen and I'd be happy to coordinate with you. And before we wrap up, I'd just like to highlight that the PRIMRE team in November will begin interviewing marine renewable energy developers and select researchers to document important findings and lessons learned in the development, testing, permitting, etc. of marine renewable devices and associated technologies. So if you're interested in participating, my email again is on the screen, and we would love for you to reach out and participate in our new research study. And then with that, I'm going to pass things off back to Andrea.
Thank you, Haley. That's great. Sorry, that was a lot of information coming at you, but these slides will be posted, so you'll be able to look at them later. But in the meantime, we have a few questions, and if you've got questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat now. But the questions we have, so maybe this is best addressed to Jonathan. What are the advantages of having this PRIMRE aggregate search versus just going out and doing a Google search to find documents?
Yeah, no, good question. Yeah, Google is pretty common these days, and it's one of the most common entry points to most websites. I'd say an advantage to the aggregate search is that you're looking through curated results that are curated by experts in the marine renewable energy industry. And so you're finding stuff that has tags and whatnot that make it a lot more intuitively searchable because the content is basically pre-sorted. Then additionally, if you're looking for something specific, PRIMRE is going to be a good place to be able to find it. But if you're doing a general search, you can rest assured that you're then looking through information from trustworthy sources. These days, you don't know what you're going to get on Google. And so you're looking through a bunch of curated, authoritative, government-funded, sources of information. So it's going to be higher quality there.
Thank you. Okay, another question has come up. Are these databases mobile friendly? Can I use them on my tablet? And especially the photo library that Haley just showed, can I download these from a tablet?
Thanks, Andrea. Yes, so both Teethis and Teethis Engineering are mobile friendly. Most of the features will switch into the mobile view pretty easily, especially the photo library with the dots along the bottom. You should be able to download all of those images pretty seamlessly.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have a question about signature projects. I guess for Lisel. It sounds like the signature projects are all DOE funded. Can we add or ask to have a signature project added that is not DOE funded or perhaps not US based?
So we cannot. So it's mainly for DOE to, like for their project to have like a location where to find all the information. But this is why we also did lessons learned, is to be able to showcase the industry and to have more information regarding some projects that are not DOE funded, but also would have very interested information for the MRE industry to learn. And so that's pretty much why we started lessons learned, and we are hoping to have a lot of people to talk to. And please, if you're interested to talk to us about any lessons learned you have on the marine renewable energy projects that you've been working on, let us know. Thank you.
Thank you. Another question here. Early on, you said there was going to be connection to international databases. How is that going to happen, and what will that look like through the PRIMRE system? And maybe I should address that. This is Andrea. We are, in fact, going to host a webinar with the international data community sometime in the spring under the auspices of Ocean Energy Systems to try to make those connections. Haley, could you go back to the wiring diagram and up at the beginning, please? The idea is that we would like to be able to make the connections to PRIMRE without necessarily bringing, the world's data into PRIMRE. But if you see that wiring diagram, you will see that over there on the right, upper right, 2 o'clock, it says international databases, and it is our intent with providing guidance and data formats and so on to try to make those kinds of connections. So if you are involved with any other countries' MRE data systems, we would really love to make those contacts and try to make that happen. And the same is true for other US domestic databases. If there are databases that are funded outside of Department of Energy that seem pertinent, we'd love to have those connections made as well. Okay, we have another question. The question is, do we have established standards of submission of observations, resource characterization, and environmental observations related to MHK, to Marine Renewables. I'll take the first crack at that. Then I'm going to give it to Jonathan for the real answer. We are doing our best to have established standards. And certainly within Teethis and Teethis Engineering, we have very specific ways in which the information come in. For the other databases, they are trying to do the same, but this aggregate search is a key to being able to make all that work together. John, do you want to say that the right way?
Yeah, sure. I guess what I would add is that, there's some actually, every database is a little bit different, so they'll have slightly different approaches. So the Teethis websites are primarily added by the P&L team. And so if you wanted to add a new document there, you would simply email it to us, and we can get it added probably the same day. Now MHKDR has more of a form-based submission, and it's really, rather than being collected by the team, it's being collected by the community, and largely because Water Power Technologies Office is able to say, hey, if you've received funding, you need to put your data here. And so people adding content to that, there's a form that kind of walks you through all the steps, and you can hold that data. If you don't want it to be public, you can kind of hold it for a short time, and there's lots of, it kind of guides you through the process pretty nicely. Some of the newer databases, Telesto and the Technologies database, are a little more open, and so we are looking, community is able to go in and add to those. Of course, we keep an eye on things and kind of make sure that data inputs are good. But there's lots of ways for kind of the community to add content to it, and hopefully that got at the question a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, I think that to be clear, we are striving for consistency in the way that information is, and we will on our own databases insist it goes in a certain way. As we try to move further out and add connections to other domestic or international databases, we aren't going to dictate what that looks like, but we will do our best to have data dictionaries and ways that those can be moved back and forth. So that is something we're working very actively on. And in Telesto and MRE software, they have been developing a lot of these sort of standards, if you want to call them that. Okay, we have another question, a great question about clarifying signature projects. It sounds like you're recommending we duplicate the content on the signature project page with content on the home page, maybe on Teethis or Teethis Engineering. Why is this? It feels like a maintenance issue. Also, if there's duplicate content, which one of the primary page users should we be looking at? I'll answer this first and then turn it to Lisel. Sorry, that's a bit of a misunderstanding. The content only exists in one place, Teethis or Teethis Engineering. We are simply adding tags to those primary pieces of information so they can be gathered together and viewed very rapidly through the signature project lens. It is not a duplication of information, but simply a delving into the databases, the relevant databases. The reference model project is a great example. There is material on Teethis, there's material on Teethis Engineering, and there's material on MHKDR that fall under that signature project. But when you pull that signature project up and ask for that information, it will indicate to you where it is and simply, import it from there. Lisel, is that close enough?
Yeah, it is. And I think also it's a great example, the reference model project, because they had one page before and it doesn't exist anymore. So they didn't know where to put their content. So that's why we made that. And the paper that are related to one of these projects, some of them were actually already on Teethis Engineering. We just added a tag for the people who want to know more about this signature project. We actually have also access to the paper that most of them were already under Teethis Engineering.
Great. Could we, Haley, go back to the signature project page, the slide that Lisel was showing where the tagging was? Yeah, maybe this one helps. You can see that, and the reference model is the one we started with. It's what sort of gave us the idea that there was content that could disappear off the web or make it very difficult. You'll see that there were 6 reference models, and each of those generated a data set for design of one of the devices over on the right there. And we have found that since the signature project wrapped up a number of years ago, there is quite a number of papers that have been written using those data sets. So that's why, yeah, great, thank you. See, there's a paper that was written using one of the data sets out of the signature project, and those are continuing to be generated. So it's really just the ability to be able to quickly put sort of feelers into the various databases and pull them together. And so far it's Teethis Engineering and MHKDR that we have, you know, kind of delved into for this, but we will be adding in the other knowledge bases to search for these relevant pieces. Perhaps there's some code that's been used that's in the MRE software knowledge base, etc. So yeah, great question. Okay, one more question here. What is the purpose of the lessons learned? You said you are going to interview developers and researchers for information of what has gone on with device development and testing. What will the product be? Haley, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So our hope is that in collecting the lessons learned and important findings from the various developers and researchers, that we can integrate these into possibly and more likely stories that can be disseminated through the industry and the community for everyone to learn the lesson and that help progress the industry in a faster and more efficient way. They'll likely be integrated with throughout PRIMRE with the available data sets and other products that have been related to those projects. So it's still in development and we're working on it, but it'll likely be stories with integrated products.
Great. And we have another lessons learned question. Will lessons learned include best practices? Maybe I'll address that. We certainly hope so. We are really, ideally, we would have a set of, maybe there's a set of lessons around the design process that had something that a hard-earned lesson that using specific kinds of hydrodynamic modeling or device modeling or something beforehand really saved times using an established code, etc. One could assume that that would be clearly a best practice, but we're sort of not predetermining some of that because we don't know what we'll get. We're really hoping we could end up with some stories and from those best practices, and with luck, we might even be able to point towards some products, data products, or other sorts of products that would be great for new developers entering into the field. Here's some things you really ought to look at and read before you get into this, you know, and this sort of thing. But we aren't too certain yet, and we're leaving it a bit wide open. I also want to note that with lessons learned, at the moment, we are starting with US developers and researchers, and some of this has to do with our permissions through the Department of Energy for doing human subjects research, which is what this is considered. But we are very hopeful as we roll along through this year, we'll be able to add much more in the international arena as well. So if you do have an interest, please get in touch with us. Haley's email's there on the end. Haley's sort of our point person on that, but you can contact any one of us. Okay, any more questions? I'm not seeing any more questions coming in right now. On this last slide, you have all of our emails, including Rick Driscoll is the lead for the National Renewable Energy Lab. Kelly Rule's the lead for Sandia National Laboratories. And what you're seeing here is the image of the PRIMRE front page, and this webinar will be recorded along with the Q&A, and it will be mounted here on the webinar series, under the webinar series button. You'll see the slides, you'll hear the speakers, and you'll hear the Q&A. Okay, with that, unless we have any other questions, or John, Lisel, or Haley, anything else we'd like to add?
We're good.
Okay, well, thank you very much for spending time with us today. And I would encourage you, even if you're familiar with PRIMRE and the various knowledge hubs, please keep checking back. We do have staff adding content all the time. And we are also still doing a great deal of development, particularly on the PRIMRE main page here and what's behind it, as well as in the other knowledge hubs. So thank you very much for joining us today, and I think we're done.